We're going to be recording today's conversation. Happy Wednesday and welcome to New Professionals, 5 Tools for Your Toolbelt. My name is Renée Delgado-Riley, Director of Student Life Assessment and Research at the University of Oregon, and I'll serve as your moderator today. On behalf of the SAL Professional Development Committee, I thank you for participating in today's structured conversation, and an extra thank you to today's presenters. As you know, we're committed to involve, feature, and honor many inclusive voices in this process. And I do want to remind you all, if you have ideas for future topics, please feel free to fill out the structured conversation form on our website, which I'll post in the chat here, or feel free to reach out to me directly. Also, during today's conversation, feel free to tweet anything with reactions, comments, lingering visuals. Our hashtag is NewSalPros and mention SAL assessment leaders, and I'll post that information in the chat shortly. So I'll now like to introduce our presenters. Annie Cole, Director of Research Modern Classrooms Project, Sindy L. Fleming, Associate Dean of Students, Carleton College, and Angie Moreno, Manager of Assessment and Evaluation at the Metropolitan State University of Denver. So without further ado, I want to give the floor over to our wonderful presenters to walk you through 5 new professionals.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I guess now just to get us started, thank you, Renee. If we just want to know, we want to know who is in the room. So we're going to launch a poll. So just take a couple of seconds to answer the questions. Wonderful. Those are coming in. Okay. And make sure you answer, and we are going to close the poll. And as we can see, we have a little bit of graduate students here in the room with us. And we also have first-year professionals. Are you able to see that as well? No? Okay, there you go. Yep, and we have 5+ years of professionals here in the room as well. Those are the higher numbers, okay? So in the chat, if you're also able just to share with us, what are you hoping to take away from this conversation, just so we can see what it is that you're looking forward to and, address it as well. Okay, so thank you. We are going to move on to the next. Do we see the chat? Okay, so we will go ahead and move on to our agenda. Okay, thank you. So the agenda for today's conversation is we're going to provide tools for 3 professional types. So the graduate students, first-year SA professionals, and 5 years and on. And at the end, we will have some time for Q&A as well. Okay, and next we have the learning outcomes. And today we hope that we'll identify tools and resources available to various levels of assessment. And we consider which resources are most helpful at their stage. We'll identify key individuals who can support their growth. And here you can see are the overview of the tools that we will be addressing. We have 5. 1 is know your role. 2 is identify resources. 3 is know your skills, then build a team and streamline processes. And also with you, we wanted to share a link to a resource guide that we would like to share with you. So please feel free to include any resources that you think would be helpful to anyone here. And I will go ahead and put that link now in there, and you can go ahead and add. And also you can find our contact information in there as well. Okay, and now we will go ahead and go with Annie.
All right, thanks so much, Sindy. And yeah, looks like Sindy, you've dropped the link to this resource document in the chat, but this is also available to everyone. We put some links to resources from our presentation today in there, but please feel free to add anything else that you found that's a helpful resource that you want to share with your peers. So I'm going to kick us off today. The idea of the presentation is that we thought of 5 tools that were really valuable to each of us as new professionals, graduate students, or professionals within the first 5 years across those different categories. So I'm going to kick us off today by talking about tools specifically for grad students. I know it looks like we have 1 grad student in the room and a few that are also newer professionals in their first year or first 5 years. So I'll try to cater the suggestions as well to those of you that are further along, so I think they're still applicable. But the first tool we want to provide to you is just to know your role or your desired role. So there are a lot of suggestions here for graduate students, but this also applies if you are interested in getting into assessment. Let's say you don't have a current role in assessment, or you're partially doing assessment in your role and you want to learn how to transition into a full-time assessment role. So I would highly suggest conducting an informational interview. This is something that I personally did when I was trying to figure out which role was best for me. It can give you a lot of good information directly from folks that are working in the field, and you can start to pick up on which aspects of the work are most interesting to you. And along with that, interning or shadowing someone who's in an SA role, especially if you are not a graduate student and you want to just test something out, this could just be having a phone call with someone, shadowing someone for an hour, for a day. There's really some creative ways that you could get that experience in without having to fully give up your work or give up a whole semester of time if you're not a graduate student right now. I would also suggest that you explore job postings. So this will give you a good idea of what assessment roles exist, either full-time roles or roles that just have an aspect of assessment to them. And definitely set job alerts, especially if you are a grad student or you're not in assessment yet, you're looking to get that role. Job alerts can be a really easy way to just get those assessment postings right into your email inbox, and you don't have to go checking for them. And then for those of you that are thinking about the potential of more graduate school, again, this is something that you could weave into those informational interviews. So potentially asking someone on your campus, what type of schooling did you do to get your role? How do you feel like that led to the pathway into your current role? Those can be good questions to start to ask. Our second tool for those of you that are grad students or brand new to your role is to identify resources. The main one I would suggest here is just the SAL Dropbox. I won't click on this link right now, but we'll give you a copy of the slides afterwards. There are so many resources in here. The main thing I would just say to you is to utilize your peers, PD groups, and this Dropbox to just explore the resources that already exist. Definitely don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. Utilize all the resources that are at your fingertips, and feel free to ask other people on your campus for examples and templates that they're currently using. Tool number 3 is to know your skills and your competencies. So this can be something that's really powerful, whether you are a grad student or further along. It's just to self-reflect and think, what skills do you currently have related to assessment, and what are you working towards? And there's 2 links here that can be super helpful in this process. So the first one is the ACPA and NAFTA competencies. There is a competency for assessment, evaluation, and research, and it's divided into 3 categories. I'm sure many of us have heard of these before, but there's the beginning level, the intermediate, and the advanced. So even just looking through the competencies and thinking about where you currently stand and where you want to grow can be a great way to self-reflect. Same with the assessment skills and knowledge standards, the ASK standards. You can use those in the same way to start to identify places where you want to grow and continue to develop on your assessment career path. And then again, exploring grad school. If you are a graduate student or a new professional and you're thinking maybe you want to advance and continue going on to more schooling, these competencies can be a great way to start to identify why you might want to go into a certain program. So be thinking about the direction that you also want to go within assessment. If you want to go into data science, instrument development, or if you want to look at policy development, those different pieces and types of programs can be interesting to explore and align with the competencies that you're working on developing. Tool number 4, building your team. I think this is probably one of the most important ones. Just finding your personal community. And these are folks that are either on campus, off campus, connecting with folks like staff, leaders. There's a lot of different ideas here, from faculty on your campus to supervisors. Again, for assessment staff, I would encourage you to think about those folks that are working in assessment, a traditional assessment role, or those that are sitting on an assessment committee or team that don't work full-time in assessment. They can all be great resources. If you're a grad student, connect with your peers, either on your campus or on another campus that are studying assessment. And then, of course, looking into other PD groups that you can find peers to connect with. And then tool number 5 is to streamline processes, especially for those that are just getting started. Really, it's coming back to the basics and making sure you're utilizing resources. Again, not reinventing the wheel, using templates and things that already exist. One thing that I would suggest doing is just to start creating a system for yourself to save all these resources and templates. So there's a lot of examples here from Dropbox, email, Google Drive. I feel like each of us has our own system. Maybe you're someone who likes to bookmark pages. Whatever it is, start establishing that system now so that you can continue to have a great way to access all the resources that you're finding and be able to review them over time when the need comes up. So those are the 5 tools for graduate students. And now we're going to transition into the same 5 tools, but for folks that are either in their first year or their first 5 years enrolled.
Thank you. All right, so as we know, right, assessment professionals can come from various paths. They can do assessment work within the department, with a division, or their institution. So no matter what path they have taken to be an assessment professional, they will still need a toolbox as they begin their new role. And so we will focus from year 1 all the way up to year 5 and on. Right, and so we wanted to go ahead and kind of identify tool 1 as know your role, and we used the article, the 5 essential roles of assessment practitioners, provides an overview of the 5 potential roles of assessment leader that you can take on. And this article is by Jawanski and Slotnick, and it's there at the bottom as you can see it. And they identify that you can take 5 different roles potentially, and they are listed here as the assessment method expert. The idea, and this is the idea of being a consultant and need to have a strong background in the range of methods and knowledge of assessment practice. The narrator or translator role is someone who can tell the story using the data to different audiences. And the facilitator / guide, this would be a person who needs to have an understanding of campus culture and the relationships, either to help guide one person through their assessment or help several people or areas with clarification, understanding, or collaboration. And then we have the political navigator. This would be the assessment practitioner that would need to work with various areas of the institution. Therefore, they would need to understand the campus politics. And the visionary, the believer, would be someone who can see the larger educational system and national trends. And next.
Awesome, thank you so much. So as we were talking through this presentation, we recognize that each of us come to assessment in a different way, and we are have a different role, as Sindy has just spoken to in assessment. We also recognize that there's some low overlap as far as some of the things that we're going to be talking about here. So as you can see, as we move into tool number 2, we start to talk about identifying resources available and or needed, right? So in year 1, as we were discussing, this really comes from our own personal journey. And so I've been in assessment now for about 1.5 years as a full-time professional assessment manager for my university. And in the role that I have currently, it really did take me about 1 year to learn the institution, learn the area. I'm new to Denver, new to Colorado, new to higher ed in Colorado. So making sure that I'm aware of the processes and systems in place at this institution is really, really important. And then I also needed to know what existing technology, software, data storage is in place at this university. Every university is different, and they're different in terms of where they house their data, who oversees the data. And so for me, it was recognizing that I need to be able to work with my partners in institutional research, not just in student affairs. And so that really is year 1 for me. But then if we're going into year 2, we really need to then, having taken a scan of what we have available to us, we need to start to consider how we begin to advocate for additional needs, right? Do we need more software? Do we need different software? Do we need better software? Do we need other resources, other people? You know, we can think of staffing if it's possible. Can we start to strategically plan to bring on more staff to help us with the work that we know will build out of assessment? There's also other software that we know is really important, like Anthology. Anthology is such an important tool for the work that we do. I have access to LinkedIn Learning through my university. And so I've actually been working my way through Tableau trainings because that is a software that our university uses that I am not familiar with. So I've been taking advantage of things like that.
And then I would add that from year 3 and on, it's something that we always say, right? Within our practice, we should always reassess our tools and the resources that we have available and that we're using, because as we know, technology changes. So we need to make sure that we're current in what we have.
I'd add in here at the very bottom that throughout this process, we know that we have access to the student affairs assessment leaders. So from the very beginning, and you'll see that all across the bottom of this slide, just make sure that you're accessing the resources and the tools that SAL provides you, because it's super important and it's there, and we don't need to, as we've mentioned, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. All right, so then we can go on to tool number 3, which is know your skills, your competencies, and your needs. So through, I believe it is Anthology, we may have provided the link. Yes, in the resources document, number 1 there is the aptitude and attitude survey that Anthology has put together. Super great tool to get like a really introductory baseline read at the individual level of staffing, and then at the departmental level, like where are people at with assessment? Are they new to it? Or do they fear it? Are they experts? What do they know? And what do you need to know about your team before you can get started? And then really important in my last year is I took the time to meet one-on-one with each and every director within student affairs to learn again what their needs are, where their competencies are, what processes they have put in place already, so that I know where to go from here.
And beyond year 1, it's something that, just look at, maybe consider every 5th year or so, we just repeat the aptitude and attitude survey within your staff, especially in my role where I'm an associate dean of students, but also serve as a chair for the assessment team. We have a turnover of staff, right, in student affairs. And so it's just good to kind of get a good reading on the staff's ability and their attitude towards assessment. And that information, of course, you can always use it to help and provide workshops and also lunch and learn sessions for them based on what they identify are some of the areas they would need help with.
I did want to point out that Renee also did just mention in the chat, recommended the online open course. I've gone through this now 2 different times. It's usually offered in the spring semester. And the first time I went through it as an individual, and then the second time I led a group of professionals within my organization through the course. And so we learned a lot together, and it's I really enjoyed it. And there's a lot of information in there as well.
Second that as well. And so tool 4 is build a team. It is so important to have a team, whether you are from a large institution or a small institution like mine, where we wear many hats, right? It's important to have a team that is made up of different people within the division, different roles. So consider having somebody from the as a director or area director, assistant director, just so they can increase the comfort level with them, but then also bring different skill levels into the group.
I also wanted to point out, again, from my experience, I'm one person in our student affairs area where my job description is assessment, right? Like it is, I am the manager of assessment and evaluation for our university. And so I do have a formal team, but that formal team is made up of other managers. So I sit on a team with our budget manager, our communications manager, all very different types of work. That is my formal team at work. But I also have an informal team. I work with our business intelligence staff. I work with our institutional research staff, all other people, academic effectiveness that I know that if we come together is going to be really important to driving assessment efforts at the university. So that's what I consider. I mean, it's somewhat of a formal team, but it's also very informal because I don't have any direct connection to them other than sitting in on meetings and making sure that we're listening to each other and the work that we do. And I've done that within that first year. Beyond the first year, I'd also just make sure that you're networking outside your institution. Things change and they're like ebbs and flows all the time. And so it's really important to be familiar with what is going on with assessment, not just within your institution, but outside your institution, right? I can go right down the road to University of Colorado Boulder and be like, hey, what are you all working on? How can we learn together? How can we grow together? I can also attend conferences outside of my institution. For example, I'm attending the IUPUI Assessment Institute in the next week or two. I think it's next week. It's a free virtual offering right now. So I'll drop that in the resources as well in a little bit. But there's so much out there to help you grow your competency, to help you also build your team outside of the university. So then the last tool here that we wanted to talk about with the new assessment professionals year 1 and beyond is, again, thinking about now that you've gone through the first 4 tools that we've mentioned, right? Is now thinking through like streamlining those processes. We want to conduct a scan of what processes are already in place. We want to, something I've done and I adapted from Texas A&M was assessment consultation request form. I can't do it all. And so I've asked departments and directors to specifically reach out to me whenever they need guidance or coaching when it comes to their assessment projects. And so I've created this assessment consultation request form that is in the resource documents form that we shared with you to get an understanding of what folks need help with before I even meet with them. We also want to make sure that we continue to offer education and training for our staff while we are taking a scan of the processes that are in place. And then that leads us to just flexibility with templates, right? We know, again, that there's not one way of doing things. And so offering up some resources like templates and guidelines for your staff and the people that you work with is going to be really important as you begin to like really get set in your processes for that university, which Sindy will talk about.
Yeah, and so once you've done that, or you conducted the scan of the process and you get an understanding of what the needs are and what has been established, then you can move on to the following year to work on the assessment plans. You know, what's needed, and the reports. What does that template look like? What would be helpful for you, the institution, your area? And from that, you also go ahead and work on your assessment cycle and based on your calendar year and how your school works. And also we talked about having a website. You know, some of us do have a website and it depends, is it more external or is it internal facing? Is it an opportunity for you to share your reports or also the educational pieces like the webinars and just allow the opportunity for communication to flow back and forth with others in your area. And next we have an activity for you.
And actually, before we get into the activity, maybe we can just take a quick pause to see, do we have any questions or comments? Maybe you have some thoughts as we are going through this presentation. I feel like we've shared it out pretty quickly, but I want to make sure that we can answer some questions or gather some thoughts. All right. Well, Don't be shy. If you have a question, please feel free to raise the hand or drop the question in the chat. We are happy to answer that. I'm a very visual learner, and I like to also, I'm a bullet journal. My undergraduate degree was in interdisciplinary fine arts. And so I took a lot of art classes, and I like to be creative. And so I was thinking about how could we visualize this toolbox for you and get you to think through for yourself what a plan could look like. And so if you wouldn't mind, if you have handy like a piece of paper, you could even use a Post-it note. Honestly, just something that you can write on and something that you can write with. I have a box of markers and highlighters that I like to use, but I'm just gonna kind of lead us through an activity, and right in the center of a paper, I kind of already did a little outline, and I might not be able to show it because of my background. Okay, maybe not. My room is a mess, or else I would have taken my background off. You'll see like a mattress over here and like stuff over here, and it's okay. Either way, I want you to think through these four questions as you start to digest the information that we've shared with you today. So from the very beginning, consider the following. What is your role? What is your development? Where are you at in the university, or where do you want to be either in the future or like in the next few months, whatever it is where you see yourself. Maybe that's like your circle in the middle of the page, and you're going to fill that in to say, okay, for example, for me, I wrote in assessment professional, one person, staff member, staff office at a university. That's my role. That's who I am. I guide, I coach, I consult, and I train. And so that's my role. That's my position. And I'll give you a couple of minutes there, not minutes, seconds, to write that out. Stemming from the middle, we're kind of going to do like a little bit of a mind map. So you're going to have 4 different little arrows or 4 different areas around it, where you're going to start to think through a couple of other things, right? So the next questions, one of those boxes you can start to fill out. What resources are currently available to you? What resources do you have? Do you wish you had access to? It's going to be one other question. I'll put the link in here, or no, somebody already did. Thank you, Renee. For the NASPA competencies, if you would just take some time to quickly review the ACPA and NASPA competencies, specifically on assessment, evaluation, and research. This is really something that I go back to often, maybe every few months, to go back and be like, okay, am I moving along in my competency when it comes to assessment? So you can quickly glance through that and write whether you're at the foundational area, intermediate, advanced. Maybe you're foundational in some areas, but advanced in other areas. It's going to be very different along the way. And that's going to be another box. And then another little box off to the side, you're going to start to write out, who is your team? Who is part of your team? Who needs to be a part of your team? Who would you like to be a part of your team? I've considered many people within the student affairs assessment leaders to be part of my team that I can reach out to. If you have not joined the SOL listserv yet, that is another resource that I have taken advantage of many times as a team, where if I have a question, if I'm working through a template and I know somebody else out there has done that work, I'd really like for, I reach out to them and say, hey, had a thought, maybe you can help me. And I've continued to get responses off of that listserv. So that's a team that I consider in that box. So any questions? Any comments here? Sindy, Annie, was there any other things as we were working through this activity that you would maybe ask, thinking through the toolbox that we could add?
Not that I can think of. I mean, maybe for us just to kind of share out, maybe Annie and I maybe just share a little bit with all of you, you know, who is part of our team, right, that we've leaned on during our profession as we've gone from being undergraduates to now in this role. I would say it's definitely has been maybe just people in institutional research that I have leaned on, just questions a little bit more about assessment and the process as I've started this role. And I have also leaned a little in the team, surprised or not, but students as well. Kind of just right, get their feedback as we're working through some of the items that pertain to them and their learning outcomes.
Absolutely, Cindy. That is a great point to make because, I mean, students are like, we conduct assessment to help students success and impact students' experience. And so we can't leave their voice out of the process. They need to be included. Thank you. How about you, Annie? Who's part of it?
Yeah, I think I'm no longer in higher education. I was for the past 6 years and then have transitioned more into the research side of things. But yeah, I would say my team has been so many different people in so many different departments. And it's just been really fun to see how people approach assessment. I know, for example, working with our resource center where at my university, we were supporting students in doing a first year survey and looking at how that impacted retention. You know, that was one piece of my work, and then transitioning into more of the accreditation process and how to support a department in that. I think you can learn a lot by talking to different departments about the work they're doing related to assessment and see that there's so many different pieces to the puzzle. So growing your team, at least for me, it seems like it just gives you that diversity and understanding how the entire university is approaching assessment in lots of different ways. And I would also say, just kind of transitioning a little bit, I'd love to hear from folks too, if anyone's willing to share with this goal setting activity and kind of the brainstorming of what resources you thought of, who you'd like to see as a part of your team. If anyone would like to share, I'd love to hear that as well.
I can share a little bit. I think one of the groups I'm trying to really better connect to is working with our faculty across campus, because I am self-taught with assessment and like have not taken a stats class since 2012. So sometimes some of the more complicated analyses and different pieces I'm being asked to look at have been just challenging and a little outside of my scope. So I've been trying to connect with some of our faculty or even faculty who have students that need projects for their courses and seeing if we can do something with getting others to consult. So it's also a teaching opportunity for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
That was actually a very a relatable experience that you just spoke to, Danielle. I was in the same boat about a year ago, and my university does offer tuition reimbursement for courses on campus. And so I went back and took a refresher course in statistics. I hadn't taken it in about 7 or 8 years. And knowing that the university was going to pay for it just made it that much easier for me to enroll and take that course and remind myself of some of the things that I had forgotten. So if you have an opportunity or have access to something like that, I definitely recommend it. But then also, yes, taking advantage of sociology, anthropology courses, qualitative analysis courses. The students in those classes are usually tasked with doing various projects that would be beneficial and helpful to your work.
All right. Would anyone else be interested in sharing? We'd love to hear what you came up with for resources and new team members that you want to connect with.
I'll just jump in. This is more of an organizing tip because it can be a little overwhelming as an assessment professional sometimes if you're just a one-person shop or a very small, limited amount of resources organizationally. I think the one tip I have, just so it doesn't seem overwhelming after meeting with a lot of your colleagues, is the kind of question I always gravitate back to is like, why are you doing this assessment? Or why do you want to understand this information? Or why do you want to know this? I think centering on the why just helps organize things, because I think a lot of people and things get thrown at you oftentimes that, oh, we have this data, we need to do something with it, or we want data, instead of focusing more on the holistic process of that assessment cycle. So this just helps keep things organized sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't need to be a really in-depth, super sophisticated quantitative analysis. Sometimes it's really just like, why are we doing this? Who are we? And I think just helping people think and gravitate more towards that why just really helps organize your office and doesn't make things so overwhelming. And it just helps you keep things all in one place, I think.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Renee. I think I've also had conversations where folks have an idea on a bunch of data they want to collect, and then when you ask the why, sometimes it changes the whole project and whole trajectory of things, and honestly sometimes removes some unnecessary work. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Great. Well, we'd love to just open it up for any lingering questions. We're happy to share more stories, tell you more about resources that we found helpful, or really just answer any questions. So if you do have lingering questions, feel free to post them in the chat, unmute yourself and ask them, or raise your hand and we're here to answer them. All right, I know we're wrapping up quite a bit early. If no one has questions, I think we can go ahead and wrap up. But I'm also happy to stick around. Sindy and Angie, I'm sure will be happy to stick around as well. So we'll be here if you do have any questions.